Well, I'll keep the microphone. So, as Tim was saying, I'm going to be making stuff around, stuff as I'm going along. I actually just realized this morning that I was scheduled to talk on, I believe the topic is, what is it? HP Prime architecture. So I know I already talked a little bit about the architecture 2 years ago, talking about Aspen, and really Prime is a successor to Aspen. So I think what I'm going to do is open the floor for a couple of questions on, and please try to stay a little bit more, let's try to stay a little bit on topic. So question you might have on the Prime architecture, I'm going to try to walk from there. And at one point in time, either if questions dried out or if they become less interesting, I might branch to something else. I know 7 or 8 years ago, I ended up in a similar situation, and that's the same conference, and I did a talk on my vision of the future. And here we're not talking about HP products per se or what HP is going to do, but really much more far-fetched vision. And I know at that point I talked about virtual glasses or virtual reality glasses, and now Google is coming along with this type of thing. And I was thinking I could react on what I said years ago, look back a little bit, and then look forward again, maybe another 10 or 15 years. So that's kind of what I have in plan. So I'm opening really the floor for questions here to get started. Mostly on the Prime architecture and on Prime itself, and then we'll move on from there.
And just before we get started there, so we do have to be sensitive. We're trying to stay out of confidential information. We'll be as open as we can. Please try and keep the questions out of the area of internal HP processes, costs of projects, costs of components, things like that really are confidential. So just to give you the hardware, how it works.
The screen, you're going to get to a bigger version of the clock, and that's actually all of Tim's work. And you do have a calendar, which
and there's
is
a calendar that will be in there.
In the process of being
it last week. So in the upper corner, you click the corner, and then click on the time, and it pops up with the calendar.
And you do have a date and a time command. Actually, it's not command. It's set up as a variable. So if you do time, you get the current time. If you do time column equal a DMS and call it value, you set up a computer time.
So there's no sound, but I see on the PC board there's the word beep or beep.
Yeah, we thought maybe we would do it. It was an option. When we do design PCBs, we try to open it up to as much potential as possible, because doing a PCB spin for us is as bad as doing a ROM spin was, years ago, and we try to avoid doing it. So we, if it has no cost on a per unit basis to put 2 traces and to put beeper next to it, we do it.
Yeah, and just from an exam standpoint, beepers are in some cases disallowed, so that's another function that we might want to consider sometime too.
This is kind of a general question, I guess. Would it be appropriate to speak to the Prime as to people who understand the 50G architecture? What would someone who understands that see in terms of similarities and differences? You already mentioned one. Instead of a function to set the time, you're using variables. If we think in terms of directories and assignments of forms to variables and then calling those in the 50G, how is that environment different in the Prime?
So Prime, as you know, is based on the HP38G calculator, and if you just turn behind you, you've got Mr. 38G just behind you, one of the lead guy who made the calculator. So it really is a successor, if not in any direct way, because none of the code was reused. It's brand new, completely different. It definitely is a brainchild of the 38. The 50G is the great calculator and is really aimed, or was aimed at what we call doers, people who are really actively trying to serve. Yes?
It's still aimed.
Sorry.
It's still aimed, and it'll be much cheaper soon. So
No,
get ready.
When I say the 50G, I'm really talking about the whole 48
Cool.
generation, actually
saying.
28 generation, 28 and above. So when I say was, I mean at the beginning when it was designed. So don't read anything in what in the future there.
One pause here, Cyrille. So I have a set of 30 units. So I'm going to be going down the middle. If you would like a prime in front of you to be playing with and looking at, just kind of as I get to your table, just kind of look at me and do something so I know that you want one.
So to go back to
And they are not for keeping. I apologize. This is our classroom set for testing wireless and things like that. So please return them all.
They'll be disabled.
they have a serial number in them, and we can track them through the wireless GPS.
But not the beeper.
So let me continue on the question here.
Then we'll do the same.
Really, the 50G and the 48 and the 38 were not aimed at the same public, and as a result, the successor of the 38 is still not aimed at the same public. However, we did do a lot of things to allow somebody who was familiar with the 50G or 48 to keep doing what they were doing in a different way, but still be able to do the same type of calculations. It's a simpler product to use in lots of ways than the 50. As a result, if you want to do complex things, it makes it a little bit harder. So the point of the 38G design was to make it easier to do simple one domain things and not worry about too much about being able to do cross-domain, about jumping from one domain to another and continuing through a sequence of things that will be cross-domain. And that's why you got this silo in this application, the applets of the 38, and we still have the apps now. The other thing that came along is really, if you look at the number of functions that a calculator like Prime has, it's actually greater than what you had on the 48. And it gets to a point when you start adding function and function and function where it just becomes too much. And it's a problem that everybody has been grappling with over the last decade or so. The way people such as Apple have solved the problem is they've removed the functions, which is one of the reasons why I hate something like a tablet or this type of devices, because I know it can do physically a ton of things and I have no access to it. Functionality, I'm talking for example about using something as simple as Outlook, functionality that I do have in Outlook 2007 or 2010, when I move to a tablet, they're gone. And why are they gone? Because it was just too complex for a lot of people. And because to me it was very simple, I was using this 5 functionality all the time, but somebody else might have been using 5 more, and somebody else 5 more, and they just decided we're just going to remove all the things just with the basic minimum. And it drives me nuts as somebody who is an advanced user. So that's one way to solve the problem. Another way to solve the problem, and that's what you see if you're a programmer and you're working with Java or C++, is namespace segmentations. So you've got this silo, and you work in this silo where the locality of things is reduced to a minimum. You can still use something from somewhere else, but you have to call it with a full address. So instead of saying I just want to talk to Jim, you have to say I want to talk to Earth, North America, Wyoming, here's a county, here's something has an address, here's Jim. And to old-timers, it's very painful. When you are used to be able to say Jim, and you got Jim, and now you have to do all of that, it's really, really, really painful. But unfortunately, when you start to have thousands and thousands of functions, it becomes compulsory. So what did we do? If you look in Prime, we still have the apps, and I'm going to try to use the whiteboard. I actually like whiteboards. I don't really like slides, for a start because they mean PowerPoint. And second, I like whiteboard because it's much more dynamic and interactive in lots of ways. So we still have our apps, all these things, and we have normal function. In programs, you can have variables. In programs, you can have functions. I'm trying to write big. If you know, it doesn't matter exactly what I write. I'll be pointing mostly. In application, you also have variables. You also have functions. By the way, in application, if you create a program, the variable and the function of that program associated with that application are going to be added to the list of variable and function of the application itself. Now, if you're on the home screen, you're away from all of that. You do have a current application. You do have all your functions which apply, but everything else, and you do have actually all your programs, but everything else is kind of hidden. You don't have access to it with some exceptions. It doesn't mean that you're blocked from using them. You can always use a full qualifier. So for example, if you have 3 programs which have a function called ABC, because programmers aren't always very inventive about how to name their function, and you got 3 programs from 3 different guys, and they all have an ABC function, and you got first program from Tim, second program from Richard, and fourth program from Vlodek and Jovic. I'm using that on purpose. If you want to use Vlodek's ABC, you can do Vlodek.abc, and you get his ABC. So you're not blocked from doing it. It just becomes painful. And it becomes painful because if it's not like that, it makes it impossible. Now, as I was saying, there are some special cases. For example, F1, to access to the first drawing or the first function you want to draw, sine of x or whatnot, we know that people want to use that throughout the system. So there is a mechanism, an internal mechanism that allows an app variable, which is not the current application, to say, I've got a variable F1, but that one does not require a full qualifier. So you can be in another application, which is not function. You can be in your homemade application. You can call F1, and you're still going to get F1. And it's great for people who don't really understand what they're doing, because it seems to work on the surface. We've done that, and I have to admit, I've done that over my dead body, nearly, because I knew it would cause problem, and it does cause problem. But for normal use of people, for people who don't really understand really what they're doing and the subtleties of what they're doing, most likely these people are not going to have 1,000 things in their calculator which are going to be causing the problem, so they won't notice that we're ironing over some subtleties and still get somewhere. One of the prime principles, if you have f of f1, which is defined as sine of x, and you're in a program and you have a local variable called x, and you call f1, what is x? And depending as to what you're doing, you might want x to be something or something else. And this is one of the problems that's doing that causes, but it makes life so much simpler for so many people who are not going to get themselves in these situations that we did that type of thing. So to try to come back to your question about the 50G or the 48G and moving on to prime, really, and I have to do the same step, you have to be moving from the 20 years ago world to today's world. And today's world in these devices has gained not an order of magnitude in the amount of stuff you can do with it, but has gained a factor big enough that the easiness of doing stuff that you had in this earlier calculator cannot be translated nowadays without making the calculator close to unusable for normal, for normal people, for normal students and normal teachers. So I do apologize because I do feel the same pain, but we are going to have to move on. And to be honest, older people around here, and I'm not pointing at anyone in particular around here, who have had to transition from the RPN world to the RPL-based calculator have had the same type of suffering. it became more complicated. You had to look at for function in menu, well, before you had them in keys. And you've heard so many people talking about how many key presses does it take to get to that function. I have to go in a menu, and a submenu, and a sub-submenu before I had all my function directly on my keyboard. Yes, but before you had 100 functions, now you have 1,000. They can't fit on the keyboard. It's the same type of leap happening again, and it is painful to have to go through that change. We had to go through it, and that's why the way you used to work on your 48 and 50 isn't there anymore.
Well,
I'm sorry I singled you out.
I'm getting tough with old age. The 48, 49, 50 series had custom key assignments.
Yep. But you have them on Prime.
Hmm?
You have them on Prime.
Okay,
I put them back just
well,
for
then
you.
why can't you end up just having the one keystroke for a program?
You can.
Okay. Well,
You have a user mode. If you look carefully, the which one is it? The help key, and really the help is a great resource on this calculator. There are, I just changed the encoding of the help because it used to take 5 megabytes for the help, and I just put a compression algorithm on it. So now it's only 2 point something megabyte. There's 2.8, I think, megabyte of compressed help data on the calculator. It's a lot of built-in information on all the functions. Look at the help tree. There's lots of things there. It's really good. But nevertheless,
And so for those that have not looked into the help, that is totally contextual. So anywhere you are in the system, if you are selected on a function, if you're in a specific screen, it looks at where you are, what you're looking at, and then pulls up the appropriate help. There's also ability to search through the entire tree to find text or named objects. There's examples, there's related commands, and we'll be working on continuing to improve that as we continue improving Prime. But it's a very, very far cry from the 50, where you have a place you go to get the help and you can scroll through a list. It's anywhere you want, press the help key, and it pulls up something useful.
And it's also localized.
And localized. And it does Chinese.
you can have it in French or in Chinese if you want to. So let me continue here. So you've got the shift help is user, and you've got the one user, multiple user key, just like you had in the 48. The big question was, how do you do user keys? Where do you define your user keys? And really, it goes back to the programs. If for those of you who have looked a little bit at how you program Prime, really it's one chunk of text for each of your program where you can define a number of functions. Some of the functions can be exported, which means that they are visible from the outside and become new calculator commands. And it's true also for variable. The functions and variables which are not exported are local to your program, and you don't access them from the outside. Now, another type of modifier you can put on a function is the key modifier. So if you have a program, you say key, name of the key, here's a function, that is going to be executed when the key is pressed, assuming you're in user mode. Even better, I did say that every application can have a program associated to it. So in your application, if you have a program with key assignment assigned to it, it's going to work. Now, if you change application, the key assignments that were in that program assigned to that application are not valid anymore because you've moved to another application, and your keyboard is going to change. So you really can create an application with programs which are going to redefine the keyboard, and it's going to work there. But when you move to another application, you're changing context, and your keyboard assignment is changing accordingly to what you wanted. Key assignment in global space program are global, but they have a lesser priority than the key assignment in the application program. Jim, I think, had a question over there.
Let's go with Jeremy first. Come back to Jim.
Just a quick comment. The complete works of Shakespeare is on 5 megabytes, so it's equivalent.
Yeah, my question was whether you could write your own help for programs or apps.
Very good question. There is actually a syntax to do it, but it's not finished. So there is a syntax. Normally, if you do export, in a function, if you do export followed by a character string, followed by then the rest of the function, it is actually saved, and at one point in the future, it should contextually pop out when you click on help for that function. However, application variables and program variable and function do appear in the menus, in the standard calculator menu, as you press them. I mean, if you create a program, you create a new function. In the user function, you're gonna see it there under your program name. So you've got the UI is dynamic and will dynamically change to deal with that. Another thing you can do with program is in application program, you can create a function and say this is a new view for that application. And when you press on the view key, it's going to appear there. You can also redefine what's happening when in that application you press on the plot or simp or numerical keys.
How many different foreign languages do you have supported?
6 at the moment.
Question was, how many foreign languages supported?
We have on the foreign languages we've got English, Chinese, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian.
You can actually see them. I'll just have everybody. So
And you have French, of course, as a native one.
if you hit, it all comes default French. If you hit Shift and Home, that's that's the settings, and then languages are going to be just at the bottom of that first screen.
At the bottom of the screen. And then
Yep, and then you just pull that down, and it'll show you the list of the languages available.
And if any of you is used to the competition product, the unnamed competition product, and you've tried to change the language, and you see here in a split second you change language. I mean, it's just instantaneous. There's no delay whatsoever.
So if you pick Chinese, how do you switch back to English?
You keep pressing on the plus. I mean, it's easy to know where it is. I mean, it's shift setup. You change it. It's on the 4th or 5th line. You just press on the plus button or choose your language. It's not particularly hard to do so, to change the language back.
That's one of the reasons that we put it on the first page in your main settings screen, as opposed to bearing it on the third page in a menu where you have to get there. So hopefully it will not cause too many problems. The first time the unit is powered on from the factory, it asks which language, and that is maintained over memory cycles, erasure of the memory and so on. So,
how big is the group that's been working on the Prime software? How long have they been at it?
Oh, for China,
Well, it's hard to say for a couple of reasons. Let me try to explain. First, the software is incremental. I mean, some part of the software which are in Prime come from the work that was done for the 20B and the 10B2 Plus. We're talking math library there. A lot of the work was taken from the HP 39G2, which we've discussed a couple of years ago. So lots of the work there comes from that. The computer algebra system is, as most of you know, Bernard Parry's computer algebra system, and he's been at it for give or take 10 years and some change. So that's also is a while. What else? I mean, we've got a couple of other blocks, but here it's pretty much the big ones. And then we did have to do some, specifics for that product. And of course, Tim and myself worked on it, and we've worked with a couple of other companies to provide a little bit more software grant. But it's a small group. It's not a big group. From the software standpoint, you can count it on the finger of 2 hands easily. So we're not talking big numbers here. Definitely much smaller than the type of team that HP has had in the past.
Hi, Cyrille. I had a question about when you have characters. I noticed the character set appears to be quite large.
Yeah.
It goes into, is it Unicode or is it compatible with Unicode?
UTF-8, UTF-16.
Okay, and therefore if you store something internally in a data file, Is it stored as characters are stored with 2 bytes then?
UTF-16, yes, 2 byte.
Okay.
We've debated, or I've debated, what to do and how to handle that, and UTF-8 really is a pain in the rear end. Please excuse my French. I had to put that one, sorry. And memory is not expensive, and we do actually not have that much text in the system. So, we moved to UTF-16 just for sake of simplicity. Now, the only point where as a user you're going to consume memory because of that is, of course, if you create a program source code, because if that's pretty much 99% 7-bit encoding, and it's going to use 16-bit, and also for character strings.
Okay, this is a pet peeve of mine.
Uh-oh.
But when you were talking about changing, the languages on and all that, you said you had to press Shift Home and then, look at language. That only works if the calculator is currently set to the same language as the manual you're reading.
I actually did not say look at language.
Yeah.
I said it's a couple of things down.
Right.
And it's not, we have 6 or 7 control in that page. In
Right.
worst case scenario, you move through all of them and you press on the choose key, and you find the one where you've got a bunch of languages.
I understand, how to get there, but I'm just saying that, a lot of manuals and such, instructions will tell you to select language, or, show it on a screen, which only works if it's already set to the language you want. And if somebody changes your machine to a different language, you're going to be stuck.
As a non-native English speaker, I do understand and I do know that on the previous calculator, the 39, I actually had it set so that the language, the text for language, the label in front of the language chooser would actually not change in translation. So it would stay in English. So it's always the same. It makes it easier. Since we are working through a third-party company to do translation, they don't always do what they're told, and it's been translated.
And we also, that was the first #1 complaint that we got back was, why isn't language translated?
Can I ask you a quick question? So have you, just as my curiosity, have you seen an implementation that you would find more elegant or a better way, like an icon or something like that?
Several. One is to have the English tag as well as whatever language it's in,
Okay.
if it's not in something else.
Yep.
Another is an icon, talking head, speech bubble, something like that.
Okay.
That you can also illustrate in the manual.
Got it.
So that with an icon.
Change the color of the word language.
Well,
Put it in color so that you always go to the red or something.
Great. Something
And you're
that.
discriminating color blindness.
Exactly.
Guilty.
Some way in which you can tell,
Right.
where to go.
I do like that small icon suggestion that would.
Or you could do a button, a keystroke that specifically calls out language, right?
I'm going to add to, if you're going to do an icon from language, you might want to just do it for all of them. It's like, so you have like degrees / radians for the angle measurement, and then the number format. And
No.
No?
No, and I'm going to tell you a couple of things. That icons, and lots of people are going to icons. Icons are very, very culturally sensitive. Whatever acts as an icon as something that you would recognize instantly, it does not mean it's going to work in another culture. And there's nothing more frustrating for somebody from Europe than to see a power symbolized by the US power plug. If you were to try to put a US power plug in a French socket, first you'll get a big spark, because we're working with normal 220 volts instead of ancient 110, and second, it's not going to fit anyway.
Right.
Try to put it in a UK 40 amp socket, and you get a really nice firework.
No, but it's a good point.
So icons, it sounds like a great idea.
Yes.
But in real life, when you have to work with 10, 15 languages and or different culture, it sucks for the people of the other culture, and you're not going to notice, because most of that is done by US company who don't really. The view of the world, the traditional view of the world by American is the US, and here shall be dragons.
You say it like it's bad.
And the icons, yeah. We still are a 320, 240 screen. You can only get so much detail, and it is very, very difficult when you're trying to allow things like customization, to let people select colors and different backgrounds to make you be able to feel, you know, that it's your own calculator, to allow that without locking things down.
So I was
you know, a
gonna say-
perfect example in iOS, you know, it's much more restrictive than in Android with the configuration of the various little things. And that allows you to define, this is what our exact look is, at the cost of allowing that. Now, we do definitely want to, you know, improve icons and introduce more and more where they make sense, but it's a fine balance, and
Yeah,
it's really quite
the
difficult.
feedback's taken, definitely. I think it's up to us to figure out what we think is the best solution to fix that and make it better. So thank you for that point, and thank you for the inputs as well. Vlodek, I think, had a question? I think Vlodek had one? Yeah.
Quick one, I absolutely agree with Cyrille. Icons in one language can be very rude in another language, but the speech bubble is special. It's used in comics everywhere in the world. Anywhere you go, China, Japan, it's got the different character set, but it's a speech bubble. So I think a speech bubble, as Kiyoshi suggested, would be a universal icon. Thanks. Otherwise, put the language choice right at the top of the menu.
Well, the only exception I can see is possibly in the Islamic and maybe Orthodox Jewish faith, where it does go against the Ten Commandments.
They don't speak?
Other than that,
Don't know what to do with that comment.
You know, another choice I've seen is just the letter A as an icon, not as a letter.
Right.
You know, which granted doesn't work for Arabic and Chinese and so on.
Right.
But
But
you
it's
know, if they're using a
pretty clear.
calculator,
Right.
they're going to know that that's a letter.
Yeah.
Speaking of language, I found the way to turn it into RPN mode and can now stop cursing under my breath. Thank you.
You could have asked. Would have been easier.
Two observations. One,
Any RPN question have to be directly to Tim. He's the one who did it.
I don't care. All I know is, why the hell can't you guys put commas in like you used to? Commas in the numbers. Separated.
Yeah.
Every thousand.
So there's.
so this one is directed purely at Cyrille, and
Yep.
I've been fighting him on it for 2.5 years.
It's what HP calculators did first, and it was wonderful, and I thought, finally, something I can show people they understand.
There's lots of reasons. One of the problem is using comma separator. It worked well. You know, that's once again on an RPN calculator using comma separator works right. Now here, how do you separate elements in a list? How do you separate comments in a program? We're running out of things. You know, is what's happening. We already have the problem. If you try to change to what is the number format or the decimal mark to comma, great. Now, what's your separator in a list?
I don't mean for entry. I mean for display only.
Yeah, the only problem is when you see something displayed in one way, it seems very normal and intuitive to retype it the same way to enter it. Why, you know, how logical would it be to have a display one way, but you couldn't type it the way it's displayed? That's, you know, doesn't particularly make sense.
You couldn't type it in with a comma on the old calculators.
No, but it would display automatically. I mean, it worked well on a 7-segment display. It's just not working that well when you move to these, you know, newer devices.
All right, second thing, no printer.
No.
No printer.
We are trying to save the planet here.
What do you need to do you need to print from your calc? Is that what you're saying?
That's my backup.
That's fine. That's cool.
Program.
That's cool. Then plug it in your computer and print it from your computer. Because that's what the
I'm doing it
connectivity
from my
kit's for.
chair. I work on a computer all day.
Then you have one. That's good.
You wirelessly send your stuff to the connectivity kit and you print it from your PC.
In case I have to, one of my programs, I want to be able to include it with the package if something goes wrong, and I've run a calculation because of the onboard computer. That's why I have the 42 and the 41, and that's why I now like the WP, because I asked them to put the infrared in. Infrared
So,
hack.
Jason, mark that down. We really did not think much about the heavy jet airline pilot who utilizes RPM
That's true, I didn't
machines.
segment it as well.
So we need to address that market a little better.
That's a good point.
All two of them.
Why not take the USB out to an infrared diode and drive the printer from that?
I'm going to be doing that
That's
on
the
this
hack.
one. So
So
I
they-
can take it into the flight deck.
A numerical comment also introduces issues with the programs, where programs parse differently. You have, so we're talking about just make the number display with commas, okay, but which form? There's so many different ways of doing this, and this is a much more international system.
So, yeah.
Commas in one country are totally different than in others. They're in different locations. They're done in different ways. They have different patterns. And finding a way to do that consistently, that we won't hard code lock things into specific ways, has proven very, very difficult. It's real good.
So, I mean, you're talking about comma, but in other countries, I mean, you're in Europe, in France, you're going to use the comma as a decimal separator and use spaces as your thousand separator. Other countries will have separator at 10,000, 100,000. I mean, India, for example, use 1,000, but it's 1,000, but that's 100,000 and 10 million, etc. So there's lots and lots and lots of locals there who do things very differently, and it does cause problem when you try to then program and things like that, where you do have to deal with much more type of separator, between element separator, between instruction separator, etc. So
5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. Even the decimal point choice between comma and dot works in some places, but if you go in the cast, it's not going to work. The cast just decided it's too complex to handle, too many differences, and Bernard just does not handle it. So even putting that as an alternative is problematic on the calculator.
No, the comma should only be a display mode that you turn on and off.
No, it's not. When you the problem with the display mode only is that when you see something displayed one way, you should be able to enter it back the same way.
No.
Yes.
The comma delimiter is for you to know whether it's 10 million or 100,000 when you're looking at 12. You got 12 digits now.
Okay, well, let's table this for now and move on. We've got another Q&A after, and there's lunch. So everyone who wants to fight with Cyrille about commas and decimal separators, sit next to him at lunch and hash that out.
I'll give you the source code, and you can try to implement it in a way that works in every cases.
I had a question, which I'm not going to actually try to answer in 3 minutes, but maybe we could get in later in the agenda or another topic. And that is, there's been a lot of, in my opinion, although I've not been a Prime user, a lot of malignment of the programming. How do I write a program? You can only do it on a PC and this and that. Could you guys just walk through the program development cycle? Not necessarily build one, but just like we've all downloaded the manual and look at the instructions, but I don't know how to go from I have an idea to I want to make it run. I think it's less complex than we think.
Maybe we can do a session on that. You obviously can program the calculator. As I was saying earlier, I actually do have the RPL challenge program here, and I did it just sitting over there.
Yeah, but you're not typical.
Well, the program isn't complicated anyway. And to be honest, I am not the person who's programmed the most like calculator. I'm the one who programmed the programming language. That doesn't make me an expert on the programming language itself, strangely enough. And there are some people who've done much more programming for these devices than I have. I mean, years of programming. It's not complex, it's not complicated, but you need to know a couple of keywords. Once you have the keywords, you're good to go. So maybe what we can do is a session maybe in the evening or something like that when, out of schedule for the people who are interested, so that I can give them a quick, getting started. Please accept my apology for the fact that during that session I will have to refer to my source code to remember how to do something, because as I said, I've programmed it, but then I didn't use it, so I kind of don't always remember how it works. So.
All right, I think we're wrapped.
We are now going to be moving for the picture.
Yes.